Right, it's been a while. Here's my newest acquisition in both senses of the word. It is the newest vehicle that I have since it was made in 1986. The oldest being the Rambler, made in '63, and this is also the my most recent purchase. It's a 1986 International s1900, and it's got what should be a DT466 Diesel engine. And I'll just show you around things that I've done so far. So when I got the truck, the rims were not like that. So the first thing that I did was replace the alternator, and this is probably the most expensive thing I've done so far. Hoping it's the last thing that I'll do that's so expensive. So the original alternator on it was just completely fried. It had cracks in it, so I decided to buy a new one. This is starting like from scratch again, like, because you know, with cars I already know where to get parts. I know, there's a lot involved, but with trucks, it's my first truck. I've never had a truck, so you gotta start from scratch pretty much. A lot of the items here on this truck I've never dealt with, but again, using the scientific approach, you can solve anything. But anyways, so this alternator is quite unique. It's a brushless alternator, and it cost me like $300, and that was like still a steal. I've seen them selling at the normal parts store for $600 or $700. That's a lot, but it's I'm hoping it'll be worth my money, as there's no brushes in it, and it's a much more rigid construction than the regular alternator. So the regular alternator was like 180. I was able to find it online, but this kind of stuff I had to get it from the local repair guy, the local rebuilder. So it's a super kind of alternator, pretty much. That's what it should be, and it's just one wire going to it, so it's pretty simple installation. There should be already a voltage regulator inside of it. This wire just goes straight to the positive on the battery. That's just a ground wire if you want to make sure it's got a good ground connection. So that was that. That was the only problem I was having with the truck. You could still drive it, but if you let it die, then it wouldn't start again. So that was a bit of a problem. So I did that, and this alternator, by the way, it's similar to a generator in that you have to polarize it, and it only actually starts working at higher RPMs. It's gotta, you really, when it's new, when it's just recently installed, you just have to really rev the engine high to get it to charge, to start charging. Then I think after that it's permanently polarized, for the remainder of the usage, at least until you disconnect the battery for a long period of time. But anyway, so I actually took it back to the guy because I thought it wasn't working. I never knew you had to polarize an alternator. I never knew there was such a thing. But well, there you go. That's the brushless alternator for you. So after doing that and losing, an arm, I went ahead and I purchased 3 new batteries from the junkyard. So yeah, oh shit, I've got a bunch of stuff there. Well, there's one. And I used an old battery cable from a Cadillac, from that '69 stupid Cadillac Eldorado that I had. There are the other 2 batteries. So I've got 3 batteries, and these are all in parallel, so that the voltage stays at 12 volts. And I really went ahead and some nice brass fittings, and so these were the only things that I needed to get the truck, you know, working, driving properly, right? So at this point, it's just, you know, you can drive it anywhere. It's loud. It's loud as hell inside. You know, maybe just because of the holes in the exhaust, and we'll get to that in a bit. I'll just show you around a bit before I continue talking. Got all my tools up there. So there's the holes in the exhaust, but it's still, you know, these parts are in good shape. There's a few holes inside. Rust holes going along there. Looks like somebody already did some pretty, not the best floor panel repair jobs in the past. Yeah, you can see this whole piece here was replaced. There's the weld lines there. So after that, I proceeded to check the oils in the differential and the transmission. There's a differential there, and that's the same as in a car. Transmission is under there. And the nice thing about the truck like this is that you don't have to lift it up. You don't need jacks or anything to get underneath it. I can pretty much sit underneath it. It's so high off the ground, right? So indeed, it was a good thing I checked. There's a lot of rust in these boxes here, and I really like these boxes, so it's something that I'll probably fix. I'll end up fixing, of course. It's overall good shape. The truck, as you can see, so the next thing I did was I had to use a big wrench to remove that plug there. It's a 2-speed axle, by the way. So this was pretty much empty. There was probably just a little bit of oil. So I refilled that with oil, differential or gear oil. So, you know, you gotta prioritize what's really important, and oils and gears, you know, that's one of the most important things you have. That's a top level priority. So for the transmission, I removed the filler plug on the side, but it's really difficult to, you know, filling through a side filler plug unless you've got a pump, which I don't have. So what I did is I just removed these bolts that hold this case covering here, disconnected the wires from the shift, from the differential or axle shift. That comes off, and then there's I think 6 bolts that actually hold this gear changer stick here, and I took those off, and I'll confess that I was curious to see what it looks like inside the transmission of a big truck, and all the gears looked fine, or at least the ones I could see, but it was also low on oil. So I dumped a bunch of oil in it until I could feel it on the filler plug, and then I dumped a bit more. You can't really put too much oil in these things, you know. It might spit some oil out, but you won't harm it. Well, that's what this compartment of the engine looks like. So the engine actually goes into the cab, and I guess that's what contributes to it being loud inside. And it's a diesel engine. It's a big diesel engine, so it is loud. I went ahead and took the seats off because I wanted to fix all the rust that was here. There was a bunch of rat shit and junk and some ridiculous, horrible looking carpet on it. So I got those off. And you know, to pass, my next step here is to pass the safety. So on the safety, if they find holes in the cab, You know, some guys are pretty reasonable and they'll pass it, but some guys, they won't pass the pass it on the safety. But regardless of the safety, I don't want any holes in the cab, so I still have some time. I'm not in a huge hurry, so I went ahead and I got those off so that I could repair these rust holes here. And yeah, you can see that there. That's pretty bad. You can see through it. So yeah, I did that. At this point, mechanically, it's fine. Oh yes, and then the other thing that I did was grease all the U-joints and all the joints I could find, all the grease fittings I could find. So you can see there, I greased all the U-joints, including the spline here, the U-joint there, that one as well, and in the front as well, there's lots of grease fittings. So there's grease fittings for the spring. There's grease fittings for the brake parts, brake components, joints, ball joints down there. There's another grease fitting back there for the that part of the spring. I checked the engine oil, checked the coolant level, and those are all fine. Okay, so then after doing that, I decided to remove the front axle, the front axle wheel bearing assembly, whatever you want to call it, for two reasons. I wanted to check the brakes, which is really important. Although I did drive it around and it was braking just fine, but still, I could feel there was a bit of shattering. And, you know, for a safety test, you need to have a certain thickness. So a drive test to me is not really enough. I want to go the extra. You know, if you've ever heard the phrase or the saying, you know, go an extra mile, I'm the kind of guy that wants to go the extra 1,000 miles. So I want to take that off. And the other reason, so yes, the first reason was because of the brakes. I wanted to check the brakes, see how it looked. Second reason was this cap here was missing. So as you can see, it's a new cap. Bless me. So that's a new cap, and there was some tape on it. So I was kind of, you know, that kind of worries me when people put tape and stuff on things, and you know, they do crappy repairs. That sort of tells me that, you know, they're not really caring about important things. They're just, you know, trying to get as far as they can with what they have, you know. But anyways, so when I took the tape off, there was water inside here, so that really worried me, because there's bearings here, right? So if that water was there for a long time, it could have ruined the bearings. But there was still a lot of oil, so my thinking was that, you know, there was still oil in it, but then there was some water from the cap being missing. Some water went in. As long as there's some oil in there, you know, the water will not really mix with the oil. The oil will still protect the bearings. So, but anyways, I wanted to get that water out, so that was the second reason. And the third reason, I just, you know, I wanted to see how it works and check the inner workings of it. Although I pretty much already knew about the S-cam, and you know, I can determine how the brakes work just by looking at them. So these are air brakes. Pressure from the air brakes comes in here. It pushes this piston out, which moves this rod here, which removes this shaft inside. And at the end, there's like S-shaped wedge, and the movement of that expands the brake shoes and causes friction against the drum, and stops the wheel from moving. Right. So yeah, I got those off and I cleaned everything up, and then I saw a bunch of rust and rusted bolts. And knowing me, you know, if you watch my videos, I hate rust. I really do. And as you can see, you know, even little bolts like that, I just try to hunt them down. Rust is my personal enemy. So as you can see, I replaced that old bolt there with a stainless bolt, nut, and washer. Whole stainless assembly. There in the bottom as well, I replaced that one. I was going to use this as an electrical grounding point. I still may or may not, not sure. Let's see how it goes. And then, well, one thing after another. I'll show you on the other side what it looked like. And so then, you know, once I just ended up disassembling the whole thing. And I disassembled the whole thing. I washed it, painted it, replaced all the bolts, cleaned everything, you know, replaced the bolts, painted it, and reassembled it. So I still plan on doing that on what I did on that side to this side, but probably not right now because it's not really a priority. Everything is working. You can check the brakes. Nice things about trucks is that you can check the brakes without removing the drums or the bearings, which is not the case in most cars. So this is what it originally looked like on the other side. See, everything's sort of general rust. Bolts on there are just disgusting. This side, see, there's some paint on it, so it doesn't seem like it's too bad. But on the other side, that's what that side looked like pretty much. So now it looks like this. I still like to give it a bit more paint, but that'll come someday. Oh, a bird just came here. Went a bit overboard with the bolts, and I had some nylon lock nuts, so I just threw those on, just, you know, again, the extra 1,000 miles, and it'll protect the threads as well. Those are all stainless bolts. These ones are also stainless. I also put another nut there to lock and protect the threads. I replaced the what do you call this thing? The clevis pin with a stainless bolt with the same diameter. So now it's actually stainless, and instead of using a pin, I used locking nuts to lock this. Replace those by stainless again, just replacing bolts with stainless, NTCs wherever was necessary. I cleaned this whole thing up, made the adjustments here. Would be nice to replace the seal here. There's a grease seal. You can see there's a grease fitting there, and the grease goes inside here and tends to escape here. It tends to come out through there. There's a seal here and a seal on the other side. And they're not the best. They're still alright, but not the best. But we'll be alright. So, that's what I did. And again, I painted the whole thing, the drum. As you can see, the drum is nice and painted now. Removed all the rust. I would have liked to have it sandblasted, but that's just not an option for me at the moment, unfortunately. I don't have a sandblaster, and I don't have the time and the resources to do it. So, no, but I cleaned it very well, so you can see the paint is pretty hard and it's not coming off. So it should last a few years. But you know, someday I'd like to get it sandblasted, but you know, we do what we can. These bolts will eventually be replaced by stainless. I just replaced one of them, ran out of these bolts. And then you have to remember to put oil back in here. Replace the gasket here as well. Use my famous polyurethane sealant for that. These studs here, some of them were in bad shape. The nuts were actually seized on to the threads here, so the whole thing just came off, and that was probably the hardest job I've had. So as you can see, that's what they looked like originally. Yeah, good luck separating those. Some of the nuts did come off, and these are heavy-duty nuts. They are thicker than normal nuts. That's what it looked like. And then, you know, you take a few days, and every day I just dump a bit of transmission fluid, ATF, the red stuff, and that will really get into that, and it seems to corrode the rust. It seems to react with the rust and remove the rust. It's really good for removing rust. People dump it in engines to get the engines unseized. But still, I used this huge breaker bar here. So as you can see, it reaches almost to my hip here. It's what I'm going to say, 1 meter long. So I think that's like 3 feet. Yeah, I'd say that's about 3 feet. And I was literally jumping on it and exerting, you know, my strength to the limit to get these nuts off. I didn't get them off on this side. I'm just gonna, you know, try to control myself, control my hate for rust, and just leave it alone. Because I know that if I remove these nuts, actually I might still remove the nuts and replace them. But I know that if I start removing this stuff, then I'm gonna, you know, be tempted to remove the drum, remove the bearings, replace the bolts, and that's just gonna take, you know, it doesn't seem like it takes long, but it takes at least a full day. Unfortunately, I don't have power here anymore in this house because there's no power here, so I'm having to do everything by hand. No more electricity here, so it does take longer to remove these bolts. It would be nice. In the beginning, I was hoping to buy a 1-inch drive impact, so that's like a massive impact gun. It almost looks, it's probably the same as, it looks the same as like a concrete braking hammer, like a pneumatic hammer, and it's just a massive thing, and the price is also massive, even used. So I just went brute force. It takes a bit longer, but now I only have one truck, and it's a one-time thing, so I'm just, you know, by hand, it's all right. I don't even know if the pneumatic gun would be as strong as that breaker bar. I'm not sure. Again, like I said, I was literally jumping on top of that thing, and it would not budge. I actually had to, you know, put it like over here. It's hard to explain, and then use the force of my legs and my arms and my back and my whole body to lift it off the ground, because my weight alone would not move it, even when I was jumping at the very end of it. So that's just how difficult it was. It was really, really difficult. On this side, the bolts are actually exposed, so it was a bit easier. But on the rear here, the bolts are actually recessed into the rim. So this was even more difficult. But I got it done. I'll get to this here in a while. Let me keep going on the front here. So yeah, I've already told you that I greased all the joints here. I need to grease these ones as well, but I ran out of grease, so it's just these little errands that also take really long. You know, it takes maybe 15-20 minutes to get to the store, and then another, you know, 20 minutes or half hour to look and find for the stuff you need, and then to exit and pay. Then another 20 minutes to get back, and that's 1 hour. You know, it's 1 hour lost. Then you need to get something else, bolts, nuts in another place, and your day is gone, man. Okay, so what else was I gonna say? Okay, yes, so with the bolts here. After removing the bolts, I was able to, the ones that, the studs that stayed, which is the center part, so the middle, you know, it's like a threaded rod, it's part of a threaded rod. The ones that stayed, I just left them and just put stainless nuts on them. The stainless nuts are not as thick as the steel nuts that were on them, but I really think that whoever tightened these studs previously, they over tightened it, or it might have just been the rust. I'm not sure, but these, you know, these nuts with the right torque, there shouldn't be more than enough. But anyways, they're stainless, and I put the washer, and the washer is really important. It seemed like you know, just excessive topping on a cake, but it's not. So the washer actually stops the nut from scratching the paint. So if I didn't have a washer here, as I'm tightening the nut, it actually is turning and it's scratching the paint, and you know, with the paint gone, then it starts to rust. So with the washer isn't moving, and the bolt is actually scratching, it's moving on the washer. So it's protecting the paint. So to me, it's really important. The studs that were on there, they stayed, which in this case was 4 of them, and then this one, the stud just came off. So, and it was seized together to the nut. I've got no tools or time or necessity of separating those nuts from the studs that, like I showed you. So I just went ahead and I bought a threaded rod. Stainless, of course, was very, very expensive. Like $70 for a 6-foot threaded rod. Not cheap, but it's necessary. You know, if I just use regular steel on these things that are exposed to the elements, it's just a matter of time before it rusts out. Then it becomes a problem. I put anti-seize on all these threads, on all the threads that I could find. These bolts here that connect the casting part, the spokes to the drum, I didn't remove them, but it would be nice to remove them in the future. I tried removing them, but they're seized on here, so the whole thing just spins. In order to remove them, I'd have to have a huge wrench on one side and another huge breaker bar on the other side, and the correct it's just not necessary. It bugs me because I feel like I've lost a battle with that thing, but I just gotta keep telling myself that it's not really necessary. It's not a priority. You know, one day it'll get done, if it gets done. It would be nice, but it's not, like I said, not necessary. So on the stud that came off, I replaced it with, I cut pieces of the threaded rod. Over here I cut it a bit too long, so it looks kind of weird, but it's not a big deal if you cut it too long. Maybe one day I'll just cut that piece off. So I replaced it, so now it's got a stainless stud and a stainless nut, and I also added a nylon locking nut. Again, just going the extra 1,000 mile. That'll ensure that this wheel will never ever separate. And I torqued it with the big 1/2-inch drive ratchet. Sorry, I think that's a 3/4 drive ratchet. Yes. So that's what I did, and like I said, I replaced changed the gasket. I used the rubber or PVC material, I think, that I had from a shower floor pan liner, again obtained from Home Depot. The nuts, unfortunately, they were too big, so I could not get them from Home Depot. By the way, you know, it's a pretty interesting buy. It's a very nice piece of machinery, and it's probably the, you know, I'm always looking for things that come close to an indestructible standard, which is my standard. And a truck like this, with the adaptations like from steel to stainless, it gets pretty damn close to that standard. It's very simple. There's lots of room to work around. I can literally get in between the frame here and sit next to the engine. Like it's pretty cool. The whole hood comes off, which is really interesting as well. It is very well built. It's very heavy duty, these things. Again, all because, you know, with trucks, it's a whole different mentality than with cars. Manufacturers make cars for people, and they know that people, they just care about the looks. They care about little perks of the car, like touch screen or whatever, and they just keep getting new cars every year or every 2-3 years, whatever. You know, they don't last. They're not made to last. But manufacturers, see, that's the difference between smart people and dumb people. People that are company owners and people that work for companies, factory workers. And that's not the only reason for this, but I'm going to tell you this. Manufacturers, companies, it's a whole different mentality than for cars, like I was saying. They built these things to last. They built these things to be heavy duty. The parts, for example, the brakes, it's a universal size. All the trucks, no matter the make and model, they all come with the same universal. They follow a universal standard for brakes. So there's like a 30-30 size brakes. So again, you don't need part numbers. It's just you just go by brake type, which it was the same for like the Monroe shock absorbers, like I was saying on the Rambler video, if you happen to watch that. Why do they do this? Because they don't want things to break down, and when they do, they want it to be easy and simple repair, because they need to get the truck, they need to keep the truck moving, or otherwise they're losing money. So everything, you know, of course there are shortcomings, but the whole design of the truck, the whole idea, like the fuel tank, it's not like a shitty car fuel tank. This thing is a tank itself. So it's extremely well built. The cap, it's a bronze cap, bronze or brass filler cap, right? The hoses are heavy duty. So that's why they're company owners. You know, the alternator, you know, I changed this alternator in like 2 minutes, right? After the this nut here, the bolt here was unseized, the bolt and the nut there. And you know, this thing was parked for years, and it runs great. This engine, from what I hear, various sources, mechanics, company truck owners, drivers, they've said that this DT466 engine, it's one of the best engines ever built, ever. Like one of the best engines ever. Now it's got wet sleeves, which means the cylinder sleeves, they come off, so you don't ever have to machine. Let's say the engine runs bad at some point, you know, oil leaks out or whatever. Now these can easily go to over a mile, 1 million miles, and but let's say they do, whatever happens and you destroy the engine, well, the cylinder sleeves just come off and you just buy new ones. You don't have to spend have the expense of taking the engine to a machine shop, which is much more expensive. Just replace the cylinders, replace the pistons, and you've got a whole new engine again. Everything is big on a truck. It's pretty interesting. Bolts are big. Everything is just like, the springs are massive. Everything is big. This one, it's got it's not independent suspension on the front, so it's got this forged piece of beam almost that goes from one wheel to the other. I've been talking a lot, I know. So when you hit, you know, when one wheel goes up, it causes the whole truck to move this way. So one thing they don't really care about is comfort. You know, it's just a company driver. You know, it's a machine. It's not a human. So they don't care. They don't give a damn if it's noisy, if the cab looks nice inside, if it's tight or not, if it's comfortable. They just care about production. They want a simple, heavy-duty, sturdy truck that's easy and cheap to repair. And that's why something like this, it really appeals to me. Right? I'm just going to show you. These are the Thunderbird rims and tires. And just for you to have an idea of the size. These are already pretty big for a car. It looks like a little baby. So yeah, talking a lot. I'll begin the video soon here. Okay, so for the rear rims, it was even more difficult to remove these nuts and bolts here, but I ended up getting it done. On this one, most of the studs came off, so I ended up replacing 3 out of the 5 studs. I still need to tighten these other ones and put them on, put the wedges on here. These are not like the regular Dayton rims that you adjust. They've got a seating, and these rims, they're not two-piece, they're a single-piece rim. So the procedure for changing the tire, it's the same as a car. Like for a car, it's the same thing. And these they sit flat against the inner part of the rim, or the spokes, and you just tighten them there. There's no adjustment, which is pretty nice. I prefer this than the adjustable ones. So one other thing that I like about these rims that I noticed is that what do you call these things? These little pipes where these big pipes where you fill the tires. On cars, they're just rubber and they're pressed on there. On the trucks, they're actually threaded on there, which is much, infinitely better. Again, you know, they design these trucks so that if you blow a tire, you can, you know, easily replace it at the side of the road. Cars are not designed like this. It's a twin tire in the back. There are the brakes. There's still a lot of rust over here. This is still a bit of a problem, as you can see. So the frame on this truck, it's a double frame. So there's an outer C channel and there is an inner C channel. Why can't I just see one here? Alright, so it's actually an L channel. It's actually an L. So this one goes up to here, and then this one is a C channel. So inside there's a C channel, then outside there's like an L. And what happens is rust, where water gets in between them, and then it starts to rust, and the force of the rust starts to pull them apart. So as you can see here, they're actually opening up. So here, like there, it's nice and tight together. Look at that. And then like there, it starts to open up. Oh, look at that. That one's really opened up. Here as well, and there as well. But overall, like, somebody painted the frame, so it's still overall pretty good. A lot of junk and dirt. Again, because it was a company truck, so they want it to be heavy duty and last, but they don't like doing maintenance, right? They don't care about dirt or rust. They just keep using it, keep using the truck for as long as they can, and then when the truck dies, you know, they get another truck, or even just get another truck when they think the existing truck is too old. These companies have a lot of money, so you want, instead of, you know, worrying about a bit of maintenance, they just buy a new truck just because they can. But they still have the abuse mentality, you know, they want something that lasts a long time and then just keep using it as much as they can. These things are also kind of rusted out, but it's just surface rust and still structurally fine. But I would like to replace those someday as well. It's just ugly. Look at that. Some points they use rivets, other points they use nuts. There used to be a crane here and an air compressor in here, but those were removed before I bought the truck. So it does have 2 PTOs. So there's one PTO, there's another one there, which is to run the compressor from that pulley. I would like to put a generator here. That would be really, really, really cool, like a big generator, electricity generator. So those PTOs, they're both disconnected. The other one was a hydraulic pump. So I used to have a crane, a compressor, and a hydraulic PTO for something. I'm not too sure what that was used for. Maybe in the past it was a dump truck, I don't know. So that's that. There's the massive air tank that I removed. It used to go right on the side of the truck there. And there was only one bolt holding it up. The other bolts were rusted, so I just hit it a few times with the hammer, with the wrench rather, and the bolt snapped right in half, and the whole thing just came down, so I'm glad I got that off. I think I'm gonna end the video here. Damn, I think this has been the longest video I've ever done, but it's pretty interesting. Just, well, this gives you a feel of if you get into one of these trucks, you know, what to do and roughly how long it takes. Just the things that you have to do. So just to recap, check the fluids, gear oils, and the differential and transmission are by far the most common places for leaks, and it eventually just the whole thing leaks out, right? And then you have a big problem. These transmissions are kind of really expensive, and they're not easy to find. The other thing, yeah, check the oil, engine oil, and that's pretty much it. And then grease the joints, grease all the joints that you can. It will smooth out, it will make driving much easier, very much easier, especially in these front components such as the spring and the like that part where there's a bearing inside where the wheel moves. I'm not too sure what those are called, but you know, if those are kind of seized up, then these huge wheels, they will become harder to turn, right? So if you get those nice and greased, the wheels will turn much more easily, and yeah, they makes your driving easier and smoother. It shakes, it rattles a lot when you're inside there driving this thing, and it shakes, rattles, and rolls. Oh yes, one other thing that I did that's pretty important. So the starter motor was covered in oil and dirt and grease, as well as the wires going to it. And for you to have an electrically sound truck, good starting, good charging, those need to be cleaned. So you can see I replaced one of those bolts with stainless, of course. That's like a ground point for some wires. And I'll try to get underneath here. God damn, it's really dirty. Show you what I've done. So I've cleaned up. I didn't remove the starter motor. It's a cast iron. It's a very, very heavy duty unit. But as you can see, I've replaced the bolts with stainless. That one as well. Put the washer in it. Cleaned up these wires. These wires were just covered in oil and junk. So now it's got a good connection from the battery. Alright, same for there. And this wire here, this mesh wire here, I've cleaned it up as well. As you can see, it's like nice and clean. My finger doesn't even get dirty. But this thing, it wasn't like this before. I also replaced the bolt that connects it with the stainless, so that now the whole truck has a good ground connection, which is this here. I've removed the inspection cover on the clutch, and there is a grease joint for the clutch. So if it's a bit difficult shifting, there's a that might be your problem. It's still got a fair bit of oil, and looks like it's leaking a bit of gear oil through the seal. Not a huge deal, but the clutch itself is pretty dry, some surface rust, but should get this cleaned up eventually. Here's one of the PTOs. That's the other giant PTO there. So yeah, I cleaned up this wire. Some of the transmission shifts here parts are a bit